Welcome to New Game Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name's Kenny.
Hey, I'm Nolan.
And this is Elements, our monthly bonus episode brought to you by our seraphic patrons over at patreon.com/NGP podcast.
Don't be thesaurusing us.
Where you can support the show for as little as $1 a month and get some pretty cool perks for doing so. If this is your very first time to one of our special Elements episodes, welcome. You are welcome here, and we're here to tell you a little bit about what an Elements episode is.
Elements is a side show of the podcast where we talk about not retro games sometimes, but more specifically, we pick a game that is quality, that either does story, gameplay, characters, music, or graphics extremely well. Those 5 elements are what make up, or what we've decided make up good games or bad games. And we pick one of those categories, we pick one game, and we do a deep dive and kind of gush about that game.
Yeah, it allows us to break free from the chains of our week-to-week bondage and do something fun for once.
We're in misery weekly, so this is the only fun we get.
It allows us to get outside of our normal comfort zone and experiment with something different. And so This week on this Elements episode, we're going to be talking about a rogue-like action dungeon crawler developed and published by Supergiant Games for the PC and the Nintendo Switch. Later, the game was released for all other current consoles, and it was named Game of the Year at several award ceremonies the year that it came out, and just recently was the first video game to be awarded a Hugo Award.
Yeah, weird.
That's super hype.
In the game, you control a character named Zagreus, who is the son of Hades, as he attempts to escape from the underworld in order to reach Mount Olympus, while being aided by the gifts bestowed upon him from the Olympians.
Amen.
I could go on and on about the story of this game, but we're not going to talk primarily about the story. I could go on and on and on about the characters of the story. Of this game, excuse me, but we are not going to strictly and specifically talk about the characters. I could spend ages talking about the music of this game.
Absolutely. Like the music is 100% Jurassic.
And I could talk about the... Don't thesaurus me.
Yeah, wait a minute. Y'all are dropping ceramic.
I could talk about the ceramic. Ceramic patrons. Or I could also talk about the graphics. Those are 4 of the 5. We're not talking about any of those, but seriously, they could all be their own Elements episode. In fact, when we were talking about doing this game and which elements, we're doing the element that we are because you two said this is the element we got to talk about. I think primarily because you two had experience with this genre previously, and so you two had a unique slant saying this one does it above and beyond.
Yeah.
Me coming somewhat fresh to the genre, I just look at these 5 elements and I'm like, yes, easy, you know?
It was a tough call, but yeah, I think where we settled is the one that we should have.
Yeah. So, we're not doing story, we're not doing character, music, or graphics, but we decided for this very special Elements episode to talk about the gameplay of Hades. For our first gameplay element, I want to talk about the story integration.
Hey, you can't do that.
Yes, I can.
That's another element.
No, we're not talking about the story in particular. We're talking about how it is integrated in the gameplay of this game, which is what makes this game one of the reasons it is so unique. Roguelikes. The only one that I've really spent a lot of time on before this was DCSS, Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup.
Which is a terrible, modern representation. It gives you a little bit of, historical representation of where the genres come from, but it's certainly evolved into more than that.
Now, I have also played Hell Deep Down in the Cathedral.
Diablo.
I've also played Diablo.
Yeah, that's not this.
No, come on, there are certain, it's certainly a dungeon crawl. It's certainly those kinds of things.
There's the evolution of it, yes.
One of the things that Hades does exceptionally well is integrate from the very beginning to the very end story. This genre is not known for its storytelling.
At all.
In fact, a lot of them don't even...
Yeah, it's not the point most of the time.
Oh, not at all. In fact, a lot of them just know that, so they don't even do any story, really. And that's fine. Yeah. But this game adds in the story, and I've said it 1,000 times on the podcast, story and characters are the two things that I look for most in a video game. And so this genre hasn't historically been my favorite genre because they aren't typically rife with story and characters. Hades changes all of that. I acquiesced when you guys suggested gameplay because the gameplay is so intricately linked to both the characters and the story. Yeah. And I just love how it is telling a story and you losing progresses the story.
That's also not a thing. In story games, that's not a thing. You're supposed to win to progress the story.
Oh, yeah. The whole point here is die to progress the story. And it's so great.
It's backwards. And I don't want us to understate how difficult that is. You mentioning that this genre doesn't do story. There's a good reason for it. Developers, if you're listening, don't try it. You can't do it like this. You can't, dude. The way... The amount of really voice lines, the amount, because you think about this genre, you lose, you start over, and then it's different from the last run. Fine, you can code that in, but if you're going to layer in voice acting, you're going to layer in character development, story progression, you can't do it. They did it perfectly, dude.
And it's so creative because in dungeon crawls, in these games where you play the same game over and over and over again, you're playing the same game over and over and over again. And a lot of it's procedurally generated, so it is different. But here, you're never playing the same game twice. Not only because of the generation of the stage, but because of you're meeting the different characters and because the dialogue and the story is growing and because even when you come back, it's forwarding the narration and the story. It's just absolutely brilliant.
Because you know what else? Each run, you have a different purpose. You maybe were on a track to accomplish a goal, right? But then a character says something to you that's like, hey, if you see so-and-so out there, you're like, that's what I'm doing next run.
I gotta go find so-and-so, right?
It dictates your runs. It's so good.
Yeah. I know you talked about the integration, but it really is in everything. You get low on health, you're going to get story beats from the characters you encounter that acknowledge the fact that you're low on health. It's it's dynamic, the kinds of things they do.
Yeah.
The interactions that you have are so varied and yet feel so cohesive. Some of those have to just be random and kind of hooks off of one or two specific kind of triggers. But because they work together so flawlessly, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you're going through this scripted story, even though you're making these real-time decisions and getting somewhat real-time reactions for all of that. And so it makes it feel like you're making all the decisions, but that the story is evolving around you. It obviously isn't. All of this stuff is pre-scripted, but in many ways it's a choose your own adventure book. You're going through it, but it's still a novel and a fleshed out story, and you're getting to the end. And that's really hard to do in this genre. I agree, Dustin. It's amazing.
One of the final things here is that we said that death doesn't mean you lose. It continues the story. But also on the flip side, beating the game isn't finishing the game. And Kenny and I have, in reference back to DCSS, have somewhat drifted away from DCSS because Kenny has mastered the game. I mean, he beat it, and it's done. And you can do different characters, and it's going to be a different gameplay. But when you beat the game here, it's just the start of this game. And because the whole idea is Zagreus is no matter what's happening in the game or when you finish a game, you're still dying, going back to the beginning again, and then you're doing it all over again. But linking that, it's never the same. And so it's always different as you build relationships with the Olympians, as you build relationships with your family, it's always progressing the story. And that's a really cool addition to this genre.
Yeah, the story here is great and so tightly intertwined. The thing I want to talk about, though, that's one of the things I think that they do well, is giving you a launching place for that story. So you've got the nature of this game, you've got a character who needs setting up. You've got relationships that we've already talked about that are getting built. You've got all this stuff that's happening, things that are unlocking, goals you're trying to check off, just like a list of to-dos. And that can be hard to manage. It could end up being really menu heavy. It could end up being something that is kind of onerous, but they handle this so well by sticking you into this hub world that is warm and welcoming and inviting and part of the story and discoverable and unlockable, so that there's this sort of mystery there. And they just, the decisions they made to take all the mechanics of the game and put them in a place that made them not feel overwhelming, because there's so many, and make them manageable, but make them feel like they're part of the world that you're in, is a really hard thing to do. And they do it flawlessly.
I think my favorite part about that hub world, I mean, besides the fact that it literally feels like your house, like you kind of settle into that role playing of Zagreus, but it's part of the gameplay in a massive way, because in this genre, typically you like Slay the Spire. I'm playing that right now, and it's a deck builder roguelike. But when I lose, I go hit play, I choose my character, and I hit go.
Yeah.
And that's what it's supposed to do. But here, you're planning. You're like taking a breath for a second. You're interacting with characters. You're interacting with, upgrades and whatever. It is so deeply part of the story. Sometimes I don't want to go on my next run for a while. I just want to like hang out. And
absolutely.
I love that.
It does. It addresses the pacing issues with this genre, where you kind of get action and then you kind of get this sort of story and strategy sort of interlude in between. But not only do they do it well. I mentioned a few of these things, but first off, it's unlockable. So there's more and more to discover. It starts kind of simple and it's wonderful, but over time you're going to get more of it without it being too overwhelming at the beginning. Crazy. Like, that's a good choice. It's also customizable. You want a place that makes it look like you want it to look? Well, guess what?
Yeah,
you can make it look like you want it to look. Yeah, you have options on the decorations and the color scheme and all of that. And yet, getting those options, they even tightly integrate into the gameplay, where, again, this thing is just cohesive like crazy.
Hell is starting to sound pretty cool.
It's not... I guess it is hell, huh? Is that... So you've got the different layers of the underworld.
Right.
I'm assuming that's hell. I don't even know if they use hell ever.
No, they don't.
Even the different layers of the underworld, which I would imagine we'll talk about some with Tartarus and different... Asphodel, you've got the different names of that. What is home? It's the House of Hades, right?
That's what it is? Yeah.
House of Hades. I mean, you as Zagreus have a bedroom that you can get a weightlifting set there and like a card table or something. It's just... It's so... any game that has a hub or a home that you can upgrade, I'm for. The early Assassin's Creed games had this, and it's so much fun because it just gives you a place to come back to and to upgrade. That's always fun. But tying it back to the story, it's another reason why dying is never ultimately punishing, because, oh, well, now I can go talk to my friends again. Like, you've got people that work at the house or are part of the family. So I would always make my rounds to see Achilles or to see, Orpheus or these other people.
Yep. And we're gonna get into it as we talk about more specifics of like the gameplay itself here in a second. But there is a ton of complexity. It would have been really easy for them to put all of the management of those systems into, I don't know, try to do it in sort of one centralized way, or not like integrate it into the story and the environment.
Menus,
but instead, instead, when you're prepping to go out on an adventure, you go and look at yourself in the mirror. It's like the equivalent of like visiting the closet and deciding what you're going to wear before you go out. And then there's this other thing that's sort of wardrobe looking, where you go decide which accessories you're going to put on. And it feels like part of the story, and yet gives an outlet for these quite complex interactions, but they're introduced in a really simple way where they unlock, you get used to them, and they become part of your environment, and it doesn't feel overwhelming. It just feels like freedom of choice. And they couldn't do that without doing the hub world well.
Right. And one other area that they have in the hub world is the lounge. And inside the lounge, they have the kitchen. And in the kitchen, they have one guy that you bring fish that you catch to. And if you're able to be quick enough to catch legendary fish, which 2 out of the 3 of us are, then you return those fish and you get some added things to be able to upgrade your homestead.
Kenny, you caught one eventually. One.
In other news, this will be my last episode of New Game Plus.
Yes, he's mad about it.
At least you caught one.
I'm salty. They give me a hard time. I'm bad at
Dustin's by far the best.
If this sounds confusing, it's because there's so many things going on, and we love all of them so much, we feel like we have to talk about all of them, even our silly inside fishing jokes.
I do love that. Just to bring up fishing, people are like, wait, what? There's fishing? Like, we had gone so long talking about all this. There's fishing.
Difficulty is a very key mechanic in roguelike games. You want there to always be a decent challenge, and a lot of the time it feels like the game's fighting back at you constantly and you're struggling, and that's part of the fun. And Hades does the friction-filled pacing extremely well. There are many levels to this. Insanely well. There are many levels to this and different things we can talk about, and we will. I'll start with the simple part. The game gets stronger as you get stronger, which is pretty standard, but the way that they do that is really creative. They'll throw... You'll get used to the game, and you'll find a weapon you like, and you'll be like, all right, cool. I'm making it pretty far. I'm doing well. Your second time through, they'll throw this new enemy at you, and you're like, what? And it does something insane that will likely kill you. And then the fun of that is learning the patterns of that specific enemy, mastering them, and then continuing on. They do this many times. And we also mentioned that there are different areas, and so like each area will also introduce new room layouts and new things to interact with in each room. And so like there's constantly just this new thing that's being presented in front of you.
And one of the things that I love is that when you start to master that, and when the game starts to become easier, well, then you have access to the packs of punishment, which is just a whole nother layer where you can add so many different added difficulties, some of them that have story connection as well, but you can add these varying difficulties that make the game hard again. So once you feel like you know how to play it, just you wait, you can change the game up again.
But customizable. It's not like you're just ranking it, I want to play on level 1 difficulty, I want to play on level 5 difficulty, I want to play on level 10 difficulty. You can decide, I'm really fast at this game, so I want a difficulty that makes me go through it really fast. I'm going to put a time limit on myself and get rewarded for that choice. Or you can be the opposite and be like, I can't play this game fast. I'm going to take it slow and easy. And so instead, I'm going to make all the enemies a little tougher so they take longer to kill. And you still get rewarded for that choice and then you mix and match those to do any combination of things that are keeping you challenged and keeping you rewarded, but keeping you playing. And that's really hard to do well without it just feeling punishing.
Other games in this genre
feels inviting.
Other games in this genre rely on RNG to make the game keep feeling fresh. Once you feel like you've gotten really good at it, right? But that's not the case here. There's certainly RNG, but you never feel like RNG is the driving factor. You kind of still feel like you're in the driver's seat because of the pact of punishment. But beyond that, the game, like when you think the game's over, it's not, because there are plenty of other achievements that you can also get, and most of them link to that pact of like beat it on the hardest thing. And that control that the player has is what sets this game apart from like every other roguelike that I think is so masterful.
I would like to know what y'all think about Garlyle's thoughts. So we have some patrons that wrote in. They can always be a part of this. If you want to be a part of it, you can stop by our Patreon and you can add some commentary and know what we're going to be talking about relating to our Elements episodes in advance. But Garlyle said the pack of punishment was one of the more creative facets of the game. Allowing the player to choose what parts of difficulty they want to face is neat, but I actually think one of my few complaints with the game was that several of the changes just weren't interesting. You can make the game harder by radically altering the bosses into whole new fights, which is extremely cool, and I love that they even have new dialogue for it, or you can make the game harder by slightly boosting enemy max health. The pact had such cool high points on how it changed difficulty with enemies and bosses that it felt like a lot of its options were just comparatively uninspiring.
I get that, but I think where the fun comes in with building out your run is doing different combos with the difficulty, because it'd be one thing if it was a switch that was just like more health and then that's all you do. But the fact that you can turn that up one and then turn up the time attack one all the way and then try to beat that challenge, I think that's so fresh every time. I guess I just prefer like that kind of like grind against your own ability play style, and so I think they all add something great.
There are a few of them that are less inspired than others. I think that's a fair criticism, but I'm with you. You can mix and match. You can make decisions based on how you're planning to play a build as to which, challenges you take or which weapon you're using. You can make things that fit you because there's so many options. And so, I'm with you guys. I think it's a really well done feature overall.
One of the things that I think this game just does exceptionally well, whether or not you use packs of punishment, is that it gives you that thing of just one more run. Just one more run. I'm just going to do one more run. But then they bless you because you can stop at any time if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And come back in that exact moment and not lose anything.
Very nice.
So
I've done hundreds of runs. I think I've saved it in that way, like partway through a run.
Twice.
Because you start one and you want to see it all the way through. So I see it through and then I hang it up and come back to it after 3 more runs.
If I'm remembering correctly, we haven't even specifically said, but just the three of us are always looking for games to play together. And for some reason, we're never able to find any. And recently, this has been a solution where one of us play the game. Right, a single player game where one of us played and the other two help guide the run and make the decisions. So but I think y'all were with me when I finished the game, when I beat the game, beat the game. I think y'all are with me.
Yeah.
I was having to run. I had like a hair appointment or something, but but the last moments were happening and I just couldn't leave it and I couldn't just go back to the save. I was here like getting dressed for my run or for whatever I had to go do, but like just watching it as it was happening because I didn't want to miss any moment. It just keeps you glued at all times, but never did I fully rage. I got mad. I didn't want to die, but there's always more.
Yeah.
There's always more.
Always more.
I did all my unique cussing, but I didn't ever lose my mind.
Your non-cuss words that are actually worse than normal cuss words?
Well, I mean, it's just about balls and stuff.
Yeah, but
roguelikes sometimes have bosses and sometimes they don't.
Yep.
The end.
The end.
But what Hades does with their bosses takes it to another level. I want to talk about the bosses for just a few moments because there's only 4. But there's a lot more than that. And the depth of that is... okay, you've got 4 biomes that you go through in this game. You go through Tartarus, you go through Asphodel, Elysium, and the Temple of Styx. And at the end of each of those biomes, there is a boss. You've got the Furies sisters. You've got the Bone Hydra. You've got Theseus and Asterius. And then you've got Hades. You've got the 4 bosses there.
Simple.
Yeah, you would think. But one of the things that this game does so well is that it doesn't just give you the same 4 bosses, but after completing the game twice, it starts to evolve what kind of bosses those are. It's still the same bosses, technically, but the way that you fight them, their move sets, how they interact, and even the dialogue, all of that drastically begins to change after you beat the game twice.
And it freaking makes sense with the story because they're like, well, he's getting out, we have to get better, and there's dialogue that goes along with that, and there's like reason behind why they're getting stronger and better. They're learning his patterns, and they say stuff like Meg will say stuff to him like, I saw that coming, or something like that.
Yeah,
so good.
So good. And we already talked about it when we talked about the Pact of Punishment and the way they do pacing here. But you can even unlock more difficult boss fights and more difficult mini bosses, both by leveling that up. And that doesn't just, make them hit harder. It gives them completely new movesets, completely new looks, completely new interactions. You've got a ton to explore. And even the boss fights themselves, the way they introduce them are so good. I remember, Dustin, sitting down watching you do the Hades fight the first time, and you kill him, and then realize he has a second phase. He wasn't dead.
Of course he does.
And you weren't nearly as ahead as you thought you were, and you were going to have to play perfectly if you wanted to get through him, and died. And it was perfect because it broke your heart. And it frustrated you, but you made you feel like you had made so much progress, and you immediately wanted to go back, fight him again, and show him what's up.
Yeah. All 4 of those bosses I fell in love with. I love the Bone Hydra, and so does Zagreus, because he ends up giving him a nickname, along the way. The Fury's sisters, you start with just Meg, but then her other sisters, who have different personalities than her, come into play as well. And then Theseus and Asterius, they're the hardest fight in the game, honestly, I think. But they are so fun. I love them both. I love Asterius, like I would be friends with him, and I love Theseus just because of how great he thinks he is, right?
All the braggadocio is great.
And then obviously the Hades fight with
such
the
a
music,
finale, dude. It's
changing
such an epic finale fight, like one of the better ones that I can think of, because that's your freaking dad, and like he's hard.
It's just incredible. Yeah. And if we haven't specified, which I think we have said numerous times already on this episode, every boss confrontation and defeat, whether you lose or you beat them, has story components. And everyone's building on top of it. Theseus is like, you're not going to do it again if you've already beat him before. Yeah. Like, he's going to... And eventually Zagreus will be like, you say this every time, and I beat you every time, And like the relationships develop. It's just... There's not a game like this.
No.
There's not a game like this.
At some point, I've got to get Dustin to quit backdoor making this a story element podcast.
I mean,
by just going deeper into the actual mechanics of the game, because we've done a lot of the gameplay and how this thing is sort of couched and set up and how it works, but we haven't dived especially deeply into the sort of core mechanics of the gameplay itself. And so I know it's because we've got so much good stuff to talk about, and it was all worth talking about, but we got to go a little bit deeper here, because as you go through this dungeon, you're going to find a ton of replayability, not just because you're wanting to go back and see all the story, which you are, but because it's a completely different adventure every single time you play. Now, that's the staple of this genre. That's the appeal. I get it. But not all things do it well. And Hades does it flawlessly, because the variety of ways to play this game is literally countless. First off, you've got options to make.
Wait, you have started counting.
I know, and I'm going to run out of fingers.
He's going 1 to infinity.
But if it's countless, you can't even begin this process.
I can. I
can't finish it.
It would never end if I let myself keep going. I will end it. You've got a map that changes every time.
Love it.
You're never going to get the exact same order of rooms and bosses. And you're making choices that are dynamic based on what you've done so far as to which direction you want to progress through the map. You want to go a route that's a little bit more difficult but has more reward, go for it. the run's going harder and you want to give yourself a little bit more life, take it easy, go for it. Tons of options on the map itself. Then within that map, you're selecting which rewards you're going to get for beating each room. That could be things like extra health. That could be things like upgrades to the skills you already have. That could be offers of new skills that are given to you from the Olympians that are all thematic. Great. That's interesting. Once you do get one of those rewards, they're not given to you one at a time. You're given a choice. So you can choose one of 3 usually options, and you're needing to choose the thing that's going to help you the most. Maybe you need to go more defensive. Maybe you need to synergize with something you've already done. Maybe you know there's a boss coming up soon who's got a moveset, and you're not quite sure which moveset it's going to be, but certain skills are going to help you with it more than the others. You've got to make these choices and continue making them over and over and over again. Nolan's got something he wants to say.
If I may pull a Dustin and talk about the story real quick.
Don't do it.
The gods that are granting you the boons, there's also dialogue and story implications there too.
Yes.
That's also dynamic.
Right. Every time you make one of these choices, for the most part, you're getting story beats related to the fact that you're like choosing a specific Olympian or whatever else. Crazy.
Clint actually wrote in and he said, I feel like the charm will eventually wear off, but there was a special kind of magic to the early game when you met each of the Olympians one by one and saw the breadth of their boons. Once you finished meeting them, you begin meeting other characters as well, gaining an ever-growing task list and unlocking more weapons and abilities. It all just builds on each other.
And he's right. Each god offers you skills that are in theme with who they are.
Which I love.
So good.
So
they do that so well.
They do that so well. You've got, Poseidon, who's all water-based kinds of stuff, which tends to be all pushing things back and knocking them back. You've got Dionysus, who's the god of, like revelry and wine and whatever. And so all of his stuff is sort of these kind of damage over time, kind of clouds and debuffs and sort of this drunken sort of whole vibe. You've got Aphrodite and Artemis and Ares, and the list goes on and on and on. And each one of them gives you a huge set of skills that fit who they are, but that also offer you very unique strategic choices that you can make. And you're not just making that once. You're making it, and you're making it again, and you're mixing and matching them, and even unlocking certain duo combinations where a couple of the gods work together to give you extra skills. There's choices upon choices upon choices. And literally, I could go on forever because there's...
You are.
Well, we're going to stop
take life or take damage.
We're going to stop
go down into chaos because there's cost there. It's just so well done. I literally haven't even explained them all.
2
and
1 stop.
I keep going.
So, but you shouldn't.
And playing this game forever.
This is the area where the complexity, I think, just rises. It takes time to learn all.
Yeah.
It's easy to talk about the bosses. It's easy to talk about even the pacing or the hub world and stuff like that because those are fairly understandable. But through podcast form, trying to talk through this really in-depth mechanic of all of these boons, that's what they call it in this game, that you can get from these gods and the synergies and all of that. It's hard to visualize that if you haven't played the game. But suffice it to say, there are so many options there and so many fun options. And one of the things that I love is that they worked so hard to make sure that you would never be up a paddle without a creek. Every boon and combination works together to some degree. It might not be the best, but even if Kenny is guiding the run and telling you the worst things possible, you can still beat the game if you're good enough.
Yeah, you can.
No, you think they're bad because you just don't understand the game and realize that they're really good.
I don't know. You've said many times Dustin's better than you at this game.
I'm just saying.
Oh, no, that's not a question. Mechanically, he's much better at me than this game.
I'm just saying in League of Legends, Kenny used to jungle with who?
Tarek.
And he thinks these are good ideas. So it just carries over from game to game. But I really do love that at the end, after I got good and knew what I was doing, I didn't choose the gods that I wanted to face anymore. I just went with the flow and kind of just mixed and matched, and I could always make something work.
And that is the way to play, and what Kenny is always like striving for and trying to communicate with Diablo, with all the games that we play like this. He's like, just give yourself over to what options are given to you and have fun, and that works.
Right. But in some of these dungeon crawls, if you don't get certain things, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to be able to pull it together. Well,
no, I'm just kidding. Maybe. I mean,
but in this game, you can always make something work because they just fine-tuned each and every element.
The final thing that I want to discuss, and is actually going to be a nice transition from what Kenny was talking about, because there's more to talk about when it comes to building and playing through your run. And that's with the weapon variety that the game presents you with. You start with the sword. Basic, like all around strong, like it has very few weaknesses. It's just like a good starter weapon, in your face, slashing with it. You don't even have to beat the game before it presents other options to you. You have a total of 6 weapons, and you slowly unlock each one. There are in-game currencies that you get called their chthonic keys, and you use those to unlock the new weapons. So you have a sword, you've got a shield, you've got a bow, you've got fists, you've got a spear, you've got a gun, and you have that's it.
That's it.
And what's so, I mean, the boons that we've been talking about and those combinations are great. Endless combinations and all do great things. When you add in a mechanic of a weapon that is vastly different than the other 6, than the other 5, I mean, it gets so fun. This is my favorite part of the game. The way that your weapon works with your boon build and works with the mirror. We didn't even talk about the mirror. There are like passives that you can take before a run that affect the weapon.
So in depth.
It's insane.
Yeah. Well, and what I love is that not only do the weapons work so differently from the other weapons and require different kind of play styles. A shield, of course, should be more defensive, while a sword is a lot more offensive. Internally, the weapon works different. The sword ends up having 3 different aspects, and then one hidden aspect that drastically changes the style of play with that one weapon.
And all 6 of them have those.
And all 6 of them have them.
What?
It's not really it's not really 6 weapons. You really have 24 weapon play styles to choose from. Because 4 options on each of the weapons.
Yes.
And you know what's cheeky? They like snuck in a couple aspects on those on some of the weapons that makes the weapon play like other weapons. So like the shield can play like the bow or like the spear, and it's just like you still have the benefit of blocking. What are they doing at Supergiant Games?
Crazy good. Some of my favorite ranged builds are shield builds,
right?
And it shouldn't be that way, but it is because they were creative and give you options.
Yeah, and you're going to probably find a weapon that you particularly enjoy most, but you can become good with any of the weapons, and all of the weapons can win the game. I beat the game first with a shield.
that was funny to me.
It was funny to me too. It just works. So let's do this. Let's share our favorite weapon and our least favorite weapon.
Oh, easy. Bow is my favorite. I beat the game first,
which is crazy because when I started, you did not like the bow.
Not true.
You said something I thought Kenny, that was maybe. Like, I don't like it. I don't remember.
No, that was the shield, which is my least favorite because I still don't like the shield. I mean, yes, you can. I can beat the game with it, and I have, but I play it wrong. Like I play it way too offensively, which
Kenny does too. He doesn't use it as a shield.
So bow favorite, shield least favorite.
Kenny,
he's not.
Bow least favorite by far.
See, he was the one that said that.
Yeah, it's trash garbage. Maybe the spear though. I also don't like the spear. Sword's my favorite.
Of course.
Tried and true. The gun is an honorable mention for me. Dustin, what are yours?
My favorite is Aegis, the Shield of Chaos. I love the shield. It's so much fun, so defensive, but also offensive, and provides some additional movement.
Yep.
And then my least favorite is Exagriff, the gun, the adamant rail. I hate having to reload. I hate ever finding myself without ammo, and guns shouldn't be in fantasy
You can make
games.
it so you can't. No. You don't have to reload though. They thought of
Guns
that.
for life. They do it so well. If I'm playing ranged, I'm not going bow. I'm going Exagriff.
Bow is so good.
Smoking everybody.
Hera, bow, the Hera aspect, Kenny, is so fun. The builds are insane.
Shield for the win. Any Hades outro before Kenny does, or before Nolan does his thing, and then Kenny does his thing?
I mean, yeah, I have a brief rant.
A rant?
Yeah.
I wish we could brag on these creators a little bit more, because I think
that's
they're
what
brilliant.
I want to do.
Like, okay, let's do that for just a second, and then as soon as it tapers off, Nolan, you do Discord,
cool,
website, whatever.
Last year before, the game was nominated for Game of the Year, which is big and unexpected. We didn't think that they would get nominated. It's an indie title. I mean,
and up against major contenders that year.
Last of Us 2. Like, they were in that conversation, which, number one, is super cool. Supergiant Games, they didn't win. I still think they should have. And I know people are going to disagree with that, but this studio, Supergiant Games, Bastion, Transistor, others, amazing team. And we've got to just stop for a second and recognize the perfection of this game. It's going to age like fine wine, like Dionysus's fine wine. You'll be able to play this game for a long, long time. And I struggle liking games in 2022. I'll just say it. I love this game so much because it's so different.
It's because it's heart, man. It's heart.
It's love.
There are so many games that come out today that are made by a big company that are going to get a lot of people to play it, and that just lacks heart. But then you've got a game like this that every single detail has so much heart and attention that makes me want to give them all my money to support them. In fact, I think we've done another Supergiant game as an element. I think we did Bastion. As music.
Yeah.
Bastion was their first game, and it was built with a team of 7. From music to voice and everything. And here's the thing that I love that you'll never find in any other company. Those same 7 individuals are still on the team today that made Hades. I could cry because no other company maintains their people, takes care of their people in that way, and provides them the creative freedom and liberty to create something so beautiful. I played Bastion intensely. I have only dipped my toe into Transistor, haven't done anything with Pyre, that's all on me, and then spent already like close to 100 hours on Hades. And every single one of their games just brims with heart and attention, and they need all of the accolades.
Couldn't agree more. And I've loved that it's given us an excuse to have a game that's so good as a single player game that it's entertained us in a multiplayer environment, because couch co-op over the internet isn't good enough to actually make up for that. But this game is so good, it doesn't matter. It's kept us entertained. So if you haven't played this game, go out, do yourself a favor, get a copy of it, play along. You will not regret it.
And when you beat it, join us in Discord and let us know what you think about Hades. You heard from some of our community members in this episode, and we want you to be a part of that. It's very easy to do that, to get chatting with us and our community. It's growing all the time, and we want you to be a part of it. Discord.gg/NewGamePlus will get you there.
When you join the Discord, you're going to realize that this growing community is something you want to be a part of in even better ways. And so you may then make your way over to patreon.com, where you can support our effort to do things like bring you an every single week for years upon years upon years without missing an episode, as well as really cool bonus content, like what new games you should play, not just old games. You'll be joining a large list of people who help keep the show afloat, like our producers, Amarley and Anton and Ben. Bethany Fox, Brunt, Carrie, Captain Protein, Dan, DB Muppet, Francesca, Gimbin, Joey, Jordan, Justin, Corey, Matthew, Maximum, Mr. Lattes, Nawal, Sajin, Secret Duck of Evermore, Shauna Thomas, Unbedavable, Wardonis, Williams, Zachary, and Zion, as well as our director level supporters who go way above and beyond and truly are like the heart of the show, Brojim, Garlisle, and Clint. Thank you guys all for your support, and we love you.
We appreciate you. This episode is because of you, for you, with you, by you.
Upon you.
By you.
Upon you and in you. You can join us next week as we continue spending 7 days playing one old game and talk about it. Until then, I'm still... What's Orpheus's wife?
Oh, Eurydice.
I'm still Eurydice. Oh, bae.
I'm still not catching fish like I should.
And I am still staring at, what's his fake mom's name?
The goddess of Nyx.
Nyx.
And this has been New Game Plus.